Hello, and welcome to another episode of Perspectives from the Informed Perspective. We're Penny and Jenny, and if this is your first time tuning in, we're so glad you're here. This is the podcast where we explore what it means to build thoughtful, grounded communities shaped by our local lives, but enriched by ideas and experiences from around the world. For us, meaningful change starts with listening, really listening, especially to experiences that challenge or expand our own. Today, we're talking about tweens. That's the age group that inspired our Tween Talk third space for young people. So, who is a tween? Tweenhood describes those in-between years, usually 8 to 13, when childhood is fading, but adolescence hasn't quite arrived. It's the age when many young people are getting their first smartphone, changing schools, new friendships begin, and it's also the slow beginning to puberty. It's a time when independence and curiosity surge and when the world starts to open up in exciting ways. But it can also feel a little bit overwhelming. Tweens are becoming aware of trends, influencers, what's going on in the news, and they're getting the first inkling that the opposite sex might be interesting. Tweens want to fit in and not be embarrassed, and often the desire to be cool can override common sense. All of us have been there. But maybe the stakes are higher now. Things are happening earlier with greater implications and being shared and projected across multiple channels. Kids are being marketed to at an earlier age too. Think of all the advertising that makes tweens feel they need it. The latest branded face cream, a Stanley bottle, Lululemon, Ugg boots, the newest iPhone. Tweens are not 6 years old, and of course, they're also not teenagers. So why aren't we doing more to recognize and fill this gap? We have a real opportunity to inspire and motivate them, and to give them a head start. Why aren't we introducing subjects that have traditionally been seen as too mature, but in an age-appropriate way, so that when they do reach their teenage years, they are prepared as best possible for what follows? For me, it was my daughter who really first opened my eyes to the way this age group was slipping through the cracks. She's so eager to talk about what she was seeing online, the news she was hearing, the ideas she wanted to explore. But society didn't really seem to offer a space where tweens could truly vocalize and explore ideas and opinions in depth and where their questions were taken seriously. And that's why we started Tween Talk, our third space for children, created for tweens to fill exactly this gap. Over the past year and a half, we've learned so much about the world our tweens are navigating, and yet it also feels like we've only just begun. We're trying to encourage tweens to take ownership of their space, to step into responsibility, and to share what they want more or less of in their lives. One example is age-appropriate content on TV and cinemas. Universal and PG films tend to lump younger children together with tweens, and tweens hate this. If we don't identify and recognize what they need, can we really create the right content and support that they need? But for many families, the idea of this third space somewhere beyond home and school where young people can simply be themselves is still a novelty. And yet for tweens especially, it may be one of the most important things we can offer them. This is an age group that is too old for the playground, too young for the pub. They exist in a strange in-between, often without a place that is genuinely theirs. The idea of showing up regularly as part of something bigger, a collective effort outside of school, isn't always a priority. Many parents aren't part of these community spaces themselves. And of course, there's always the pull of screens and competing commitments. And yet, when tweens are given the chance, they do show up. We saw it recently when we were decorating our new space. A tin shed, all 100 square meters of it. The enthusiasm, the teamwork, the pride they took in it, it was extraordinary. It reminded us just how much they want to contribute when someone simply creates the conditions for them to do so. That a third space doesn't have to be somewhere you perform, it can just be somewhere you belong. And belonging matters enormously at this age. Tweens are navigating social media, school transitions, those shifting friendships and new emotions all simultaneously. Their brains are wired to absorb it all rapidly, forming habits and patterns that will shape who they become as teenagers and beyond. This is that crucial window. And crucially, they're still talking to us. They're still accessible. Surely this is the moment to lean in. And that's what this episode is all about, exploring who tweens really are, understanding what they need, and thinking about the spaces, physical and emotional, we can create to help them thrive, because these years do matter a lot. So let's start asking the questions. How do we truly see tweens? How do we support them in a world that often expects them to grow up faster than they're ready for? And how do we help them feel confident in their own perspectives while also learning to respect those of others? So, before we hear from our wonderful guests today, I'd like to share a few quotes, moments of reflection about young people. Anna Quindlen, the journalist and author, in Thinking Out Loud. It is a time between childhood and maturity, between parental protection and personal responsibility, between life stage managed by grown-ups and life privately held. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry in The Little Prince. Grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is tiresome for children to be always and forever explaining things to them. Michelle Mitchell in her book, What Kids Need Now, Before the Teenage Years. Tweens gravitate towards those who are approachable, who help them to overcome challenges and who listen to them. Collectively, they voice a strong desire to be taken more seriously by the world around them and not to be overlooked or dismissed because of their age. Overwhelmingly, tweens wish they were better understood and have more avenues to contribute to the world meaningfully. They need to discover that your love will stay strong as they begin to change. They need to know that your love will grow for them as they enter a new season of their lives. And Laurie Howes Anderson in her book Speak, it's easier to floss with barbed wire than admit you like someone in middle school. And Lisa D'Amour in The Emotional Lives of Teenagers, when our first response is to point out how they could curb their discomfort, teenagers often feel dismissed or invalidated. And to conclude, Anne Frank, parents can only give good advice or put them on the right paths, but the final forming of a person's character lies in their own hands. So on that note, I'll pass to Jenny to introduce our guests today, please.
Thank you, Penny. I'm really pleased we're taking the time to focus this conversation on tweens, because it's something that Penny and I have surrounded ourselves with for the last 18 months through Tween Talk. But, on the podcast, we've been very curious about lots of topics. So I'm pleased that we're bringing it back to what we do in our day-to-day and who we're really focusing on. So first up is Mark, who's the founder of Digital Tweens alongside Digital Children and Digital Teens. He's an experienced educational leader, researcher, and speaker with over 30 years' experience working with children, young people, and families across the UK, the UAE, and Australia. His career spans senior leadership roles in a wide range of school settings, as well as serving as CEO for a large not-for-profit supporting over 200 schools each year. Mark has recently completed his doctorate at the UNSW, where his research focused on what he calls digital puberty, exploring how a child's first smartphone can shape their development, relationships, and well-being. As both a researcher and a parent, Mark brings a rare combination of academic insight and real-world experience, helping families and schools better understand how to support young people growing up in today's digital world. And Jenny is a counsellor specialising in supporting parents and carers of tweens and teens. She has extensive experience in youth and family services, school counselling, and community-based mental health support. Jenny delivers workshops on topics including adolescents' brain development, stress and anxiety in teens, and digital wellbeing. Jenny is an accredited member of the BACP, holds a postgraduate diploma in counselling, as well as a Master of Science in Psychology from Roehampton University. Alongside her private counselling practice, Jenny currently works as a locum counsellor at the University of Sussex and collaborates with the charity Holding Space to support families in East Sussex. Okay, Penny, over to you to get started.
Amazing. I'd love to start, Mark, with you this morning. As we mentioned, you're the founder of Digital Tweens, and it seemed kind of appropriate in the current climate to start with, the greatest challenge of today, the digital world, perhaps. And you have coined this term digital puberty. We all know about the physical challenges of growing up, but what's actually happening to a tween's brain and their relationships the moment when a smartphone first enters the equation? Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Thank you, first of all, Penny and Jenny, for having me. My research focused on what happens when we first give a child a smartphone to them as an individual, into their lives, their behaviours, their experiences, but also that to their parents and their family environment. So I spent over a year working with a group of individual tweens and their parents just after they'd got their first smartphone. And as part of that, I began to develop this concept that actually getting a smartphone, particularly a first smartphone, sparks a transitional period in young children's lives, and most commonly that happens in the tween years. We know that in Australia and the UK, most commonly by 12 years old, most children have a smartphone. And so we've got this interesting stage that's going on in their lives anyway. It's in the middle of puberty for many young tweens at that time. But my thesis really talks about the fact that giving a child a smartphone moves them from a space where they're predominantly, hopefully, using technology under close supervision and direction of their parents towards independent digital use of technologies. And I argue that this is a period, it's not a moment in time, but it's triggered by that first giving that smartphone. And that during that time, it begins to change the way in which tweens communicate with each other, the way they view themselves and their position in the world. It gives them a sense of greater independence, but also can bring a lot of challenges that make them feel less secure and less comfortable as well. So it creates this sense of a period of change. And so my thesis is very much that during that period of change, just as with physical puberty, tweens really need parents and adults around them. They really need, first of all, to not to just be handed a smartphone without any preparation or any information. So what happens before they get a smartphone is really important, just as we don't just allow children to hopefully reach puberty, physical puberty, without giving them any preparation about what to expect, the changes that are about to occur, some of those things, and begin to build that relationship with them to talk openly about it. I'd argue that we need to do the same with smartphones. Before we even hand over a device, we need to prepare and be talking about some of the challenges, some of the expectations, some of the feelings that they may have, some of the way their relationships might change, etc. Secondly, I think I argue that parents need to put in place some sort of boundaries and restrictions for tweens, and that actually we know from research that they actually want that and they value having some restriction and boundaries. It's a big world, the digital world, and being handed a smartphone effectively gives them the opportunity to access virtually anybody and anything in the world. And so that's a really big responsibility to come suddenly. And so again, just as we don't suddenly tell our tweens, "Well, you're in puberty now, you're a tween now, you can do anything you want, there's no restrictions." We recognise that there's still a judgment development period, and that slowly we need to, as they build more skills and more confidence and more capacity to think, to relate with other people, to be use judgment about what's right, wrong, true, not true. And they learn their place in that space, so we can release more responsibility. And same is true in the digital world. So children and young people, or tweens, need adults to walk alongside them during the period of first having a smartphone, just as they need adults with them really strongly during puberty, physical puberty. And so I would argue that as we give a child a smartphone, they begin to think about themselves in a much bigger context. Initially, children are placing their identity within their family. Then as they go to school, often that peer group grows and they see themselves in a larger community. But handing a smartphone to a child puts them into a worldwide community of a much bigger audience, whether that's in a sense of social media or whether that's just access to a larger array of material and perspectives on the world. And so it's a big change, and we need to really make sure that we help them to see, to understand that, and to be able to make good judgment, to recognise that as they're during the critical period of forming their own identity and what they believe and what they understand, they recognise that not everything is to be trusted, not everybody is to be trusted, and that they need to learn to weigh and to be really thoughtful about not just how they behave online, but how they process the information that they encounter and the views and perspectives as well. And that's happening all the time offline as tweens' social circle grows and they get a larger group of friends, and the friendship call becomes more important in some respects than the family, but it certainly feels that way. But suddenly to be online without restriction, and even with some restriction, is a huge social pool to be working in. And so there's a lot of work to be done there to really help young people to feel safe, secure, to be guardians of their own mental health. But in the meantime, we need to be that for them and their own well-being and the way that they're seen. And to help them to exercise their own natural curiosity, desire for independence, wish to explore new things, new spaces, new ideas, but to do so in a way that's safe, not in a patronised way, but in a way that actually their perspective is valued. And I think I really do believe strongly that begins with listening to children and young people and making sure that we're connected with them. And as parents, I think that's a really important part of that. Teachers can do this as well in a different way, but particularly the role of the parent to be the trusted, connected person for the tween during this time and then into later teenage years is so critical. And there's a unique opportunity. The reason I founded Digital Tweens and I focused on tweens is because I believe passionately there's a really great window here where tweens are still open to hearing and listening and actually really want our support as adults. They really want guidance. They want to know what we think before they start to tell us that we don't know anything and that we're not, that parents and adults around them are just stupid and really need to pull their head in and realise that the world's changed. There's an opportunity there to teach skills, to build capacity, and to really understand their perspective and to build those relationships, most importantly, so that as they go into the teen years, hopefully we can nurture that relationship into a new phase, not expected to stay the same, but recognise it will change, but it's built on strong foundations that were built in those earlier years, from childhood into tween years and beyond. And that knowing that there's someone who's alongside them, that there's an adult and adults, hopefully, who have got their corner, who are there to help them, is so powerful. It's so protective. And I think this is the reason I, again, going back to the reason I use this term distribute is because I think it mirrors very well the type of support, the type of challenges that children face during the physical transition to puberty. But I think there's a digital transition that's in progress during this time, and the two crash, and so they need to be managed together as part of the reality of being a tween in 2026.
Thank you. I mean, it was interesting because you mentioned that window of opportunity, and I kind of feel like it's definitely there, and yet those devices and that smartphone are kind of coming in at exactly the same time as that window of opportunity. And that, I suppose, potentially is the danger, and you've probably alluded to that already, but that if they're then going to the smartphone to get that information, then maybe we're not even beginning those sort of slightly more mature conversations that we might have been having before devices. Because I think that's the time when you're building and nurturing that relationship and growing together, I guess, in a different way, because it's no longer the small child that you're now relating to. And I think that's kind of almost tragic if we do lose it, because we won't then be that person who can sort of walk hand in hand with them potentially. Is that also, what you're seeing?
I think so, but I also think that we know, and we often recognise that there are some bigger challenges that face teenagers as they reach those teen years. And I think we often associate some of the behaviours online and experiences online with teenage behaviour and that independent space. But I think the reality is that those online challenging experiences and sometimes behaviours that are risky and not always a positive experience for teenagers are increasingly there for tweens as well. And so I think the ability to have conversations and to make normal conversations that actually are very challenging to suddenly have with a 15-year-old, to begin those conversations there. So when I talk to parents, often I talk to them, it's not the time, for example, to begin to start worrying about your child accessing pornography when they're suddenly in their middle teenage years. These are conversations we need to be building from late childhood into the tween years, so that they can continue into those teen years, but they're going to be more awkward, but they'll be less awkward if they'll be built on a foundation that's there early years. Similarly, challenges, for example, about the type of people to perspectives online and unhelpful perspectives. It may be about misogyny, or maybe about violence, or it may be other things that we recognise that are unfortunately and sadly an inherent part of being online. We need to not wait until those things encounter our young people. We need to talk about those when they're younger, not to expose them to those things early, just in the same way that we would sit down, hope, I expect, in a positive way with a child of before the puberty hits, and start talking to them about body changes, about relationships, about issues of consent, not even in a sexual way, but we would be building the foundations about about behaviors, attitudes, language that we want to be able to continue to use comfortably. And I think there's an opportunity there. Yes, it's not, doesn't begin in the tween years either, it begins younger, but the tween years is a particularly ripe moment, because often there's a sense of engaging with some of this material on an early stage. And I think we can really build a sense that as a parent, our child knows that we're not blind to these challenges they're facing, but we're open to discussing them. We're not someone who's going to get embarrassed or offended or angry about some of these issues, but we actually recognise that the challenges are there, and we can overlay our values as a family into that advice. And I often challenge parents to think about, who do you want to be your child's influencer? It's one of my key slides in my keynote. It's, who is your child's influencer? And if we want to hand over the opportunity of the influencer to those online, then we hand the phone over and we walk away. If we want to be part of our child's, be the key influencer in our child's life, and I believe that's true for teenagers and tweens and children, we need to be present, we need to be there, we need to listen, we need to be involved, we need to be curious, we need to understand, we need to support, but we have to be there. And if we're not, we effectively hand over control, we hand over the building of our core values to somebody else who we don't know, who may not share the values that we have, and in the worst cases, absolutely sit against the values that we would want for our children and young people. So I think there's a really great, important opportunity in the tween years to start not just the hard conversations, but just generally being involved, being curious, talking about their lives, recognizing that the digital world is not separate from their online life. It's completely and utterly integrated. And often the challenges we face as adults with technology are the challenges that young people also face. I don't like some of the things I encounter online either. They make me feel yucky sometimes when I receive things online. I don't like the fact that I sometimes pick my phone up every moment that I find myself not having to do something when I'm in a queue or whenever. I recognise that's not helpful. I don't like the way sometimes I feel if I've been online all day in meetings or online, it makes my mind buzz. And we need to have those conversations as well, so we children recognise that this is part of being human, but we need to manage that. We need to make positive choices, so we can help kids to be empowered to make good choices, not expect them to do them on their own, because that's not realistic for a tween or a child or even a teenager. But we can start keeping the conversation there so that we're teaching positively through role modeling, through conversation, through curiosity, and through being out and being the person that's there without any conditions attached for our tween and young person.
Mm-hmm. Mark, sorry, Penny. Mark, when you first started talking, there was, around, it was a lot of reference to parents, which I know is so important. And I was going to ask, what can we do to help parents? But as you spoke more and more, it's actually just this recognition that this period of a child's life is so significant and it can easily be overlooked, and it got me thinking that people think, oh, they're still, this is generalizing, I know, but they're still a kid, and they'll keep them young and want to keep them young, or they'll maybe not push them too old, but think they've got a bit more maturity. But the reality is, and please correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but children, because of the access and the information they've got and are exposed to and have access to, are maturing quicker and sooner now, because they it's different for everyone as well. If you bring in physical puberty as well, and body changes, and but actually the information they're subjected to, they are able to mature quicker. And it's just empowering parents to realize that, don't overlook this. Don't let these few pivotal years, between 9 and 12, by the time they're 13, they're teenagers, you've lumped them into that. But you can still very much kidify, I don't know if that's a word, but keep them young, up until 12, and think that they're still, but if they're not necessarily encountering these things online. The influence is still there via their peers. The world is still there and existing. There's marketing on billboards, on bus stops, on, it's all there. And I think that's, from hearing you speak and as you expanded on your thoughts, that's the real thing, is just take a moment to sort of, stop and overlook it and make sure that you're being curious and learning about what's interesting them, what's motivating them, what are they wondering about? Are they completely disinterested in everything, or are they wondering like, oh, so and so's got this, or they buy this, or they do this online? And you can only really do that if you take that sort of moment to sort of oversee and take a look.
And I do think it feels like a period of almost teamwork in a strange way, because I think before, when they're younger, you're more the parent, and, you're the guardian, and you're looking at, and I do feel there is a dynamic now, especially with my daughter, which is like that curiosity is so exciting. And when she does ask all these questions, it's actually like, yeah, let me tell you a bit about the world that you're coming into and what's going on. And it goes back again to sort of talking about how we make it age appropriate. But, she's beginning to pick up on stuff regardless of what I'm telling her, whatever. So why not nurture that and also have the conversations around it? And it can be done absolutely in an age appropriate way.
And let's figure it out together, because we might not have all the answers
100%.
as well. And I think that's what I wanted to start with by saying it. You can think that it just feels like another pressure on parents to know what to do and to how to parent a tween, or to understand the tweens. Oh, I better go and research it or understand the age group. No, it's just look and take a moment as what's going on with your tween, which can be really individual.
I just wanted to ask Mark, you've been working in education for quite a few years. Have you seen parental presence change in the period that you've been working? And if so, in what ways? I'm imagining if I ask you this question, you go, well, they're also distracted. But I'm just curious if there's anything there.
I think there's definitely changes in children and young people from when I first started working in schools and working with young people and tweens, but there's definitely a change in parents as well. And what I was just going to say in relation to what you said there is that I think sometimes we confuse the notion of protecting our children and tweens with sheltering them, and I don't think they're the same thing at all. Okay. I think that to protect children, we know that we need to engage with them, we need to connect with them. It doesn't mean we need to expose them too early to things there, but we need to manage the exposure to challenges an age-appropriate way to risk. And so I think there's been a move by society over my lifetime, certainly, of wanting to protect children more from risk and harm, ultimately, which are not the same thing, of course. Risk doesn't always lead to harm, but that but in the process of trying to shelter and to protect, we've locked them out of opportunities, often stopping them having the opportunity to build skills, to build confidence, to build resilience, to build the ability to negotiate, to work through friendship challenges, and then to almost feel the need to be the defender of our children on every level, because somehow that's our duty as a parent. And I think parents are under enormous pressure. And this notion that parenting's shifted from being a noun to a verb over a period of time as well. We used to just be a parent. Now you have to parent. Yes, to something you do, and the expectations on parents are enormous. And when I speak to parents, I was speaking on Wednesday, I said, my message is always to parents is that you are enough for your child. But you have to be there. You have to just step into it with even if you're not confident, with a sense of faking it till you make it, I guess, almost. But you need to be willing to be there, and the most precious gift you can give your own person and child is to be alongside them as they grow and develop. That doesn't mean you have to protect them from everything. It means that you need to be there as they encounter new things steadily. Of course, children don't generally go from innocence to complete maturity in an overnight swoop. Sometimes things happen which expedite that process, and certainly unfettered online access can expedite that exposure. And often, if people haven't got the support, the guidance, and haven't had that ability to know they can speak to their trusted adults about things that they encounter and the experiences they're having, that places them at risk. But so does sheltering as well. And so if we don't expose young people to any of the things that are there, and they're suddenly that when they're independent and the older they get, if they're all of those challenges, all of those difficult experiences come later, it's very difficult to then handle those things on your own. And I think teens are much less willing, generally, is a generalization, to seek help when they need it. Whereas if we can breed a mindset of that it's okay to ask for help, and even if you, and also that if you've had a difficult experience or you've made a mistake, it's okay, and you're the people that are there for you are going to be there for you, even if you've done, even as in Australia we say you've stuffed up. They're still there for you, and that they'll be there to help solve the problem as it's not as well. So I think parenting's changed, children have changed. Yes, that I definitely think there is the capacity to concentrate, to focus for long periods of time is there, but I think that's true for adults as well. We know that increasingly in media and in advertising, the recognition that you have to capture the attention and get your message over very quickly within the first 2 to 4 seconds. Movies have to get that plot line and engage the viewer instantly, because if they don't repeat the plot line multiple times, they become blockbuster movies. The world has changed. People's concentration focus has changed. That may be that will certainly, technology I'm sure has a part of that, but I think there are other factors as well about life's busyness as well. And I think we have to be careful that we don't isolate technology as the sole challenge that young people are facing. The challenges that were always there for young people remain as they grow up, but there's another layer to that and another arena that some of those challenges play out in. I'm thinking now about relationships, dealing with falling outs with friends, dealing with being bullied, dealing with isolation, dealing with your own identity formation and feeling you don't belong. These are not new things. These were there, before smartphones. These were challenges that teenagers generally felt, but that's, I think, has been edged forward and is increasingly experienced by younger children. But that doesn't mean we need to be fearful of that. It just needs to be, again, that's parents, teachers, and other adults that can be trusted. We need to be there alongside our young people, not to shelter them, but to guide them through the challenging way so they become strong, can face those challenges.
Absolutely. So Jenny, I'd love to turn to you now. So you've been counselling for over 13 years. We're going to return to that window of opportunity now. Have you found that parents often miss that window of opportunity because they're assuming that, the real trouble doesn't start till the teen years? Because I was just thinking just now when we were talking about it, the outward signs are obviously much more visible when we're getting into those teenage years with the puberty, right? And tweenhood was saying is so important, and yet maybe from the outside we're not seeing as much. So I'd love to hear your experience on that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what I'm seeing. Just parents kind of underestimating what is already happening and what is already changing. And I think that's why it's so important to recognize this as a specific, I don't know, like a window of opportunity. I think of that things are changing, things are different, and it's happening probably earlier than some parents recognize it's happening. But they don't know, but we don't know about it because we're talking about teenagers. And so that means you're 13 or maybe 12. But I think there's just that not recognizing how early it's starting. So I think it's that underestimation. And then you don't really realize it's happening until something kind of blows up. And it's like, wait a minute, why are they talking to me? Why are they talking to me like this? What's happened? And it's like a complete shock. And I also think for parents in that sort of scenario, it is really common that does happen. And quite often what I hear from young people when I'm speaking to them, their experience is quite similar. They're sort of like, suddenly, I don't get it. Like, my mum is angry at me all the time. She's always cross. It's really different. And they notice that shift as well. And so I think if you can understand what's happening, and which is why I think having that, like psychological, biological, recognition of what is actually happening in puberty when it starts, all the changes and the implications that happen, I think that can be really helpful, because then that just gives you that framework of like, oh, hang on a minute, I understand why suddenly things are escalating really quickly and things seem to be blowing up and our relationship is different. If parents have that understanding of like, okay, I get why that's happening, I think it can make things much easier for them. So yeah, I do think it is something that can be missed, but I think we're working on it. We are, things are happening and we're talking about it a little bit more. And maybe I think also what Mark was saying, and the focus on the digital world as well, that is really nice to see that as a mirror of what is happening with them in terms of puberty and physical changes. It reflects it really nicely. And so then that is bringing this time more to the forefront, I think, for parents. So that's a good thing in a way that they're recognizing that.
Have you seen that? Well, I'm sure you have. The sketch with Kevin when he turns 13,
Yeah.
and they're waiting for him to turn, and they're waiting for the ding, and then when he turns exactly 13, he just transforms into this mutant.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, I think we still hang on a bit, don't we, to that kind of concept that a teenager is something horrible. I don't know, like from the parenthood stance, it's like, it's going to happen and then you're never going to talk to me again. You're going to be rude to me. You won't get what's going on. And I'll see you again when you're 19 or whatever.
Yeah.
I wonder if we're also not doing our tweens or our young people a favor in sort of putting maybe bad energy into that concept, when actually it could be something that we could reframe and make an exciting time along with all its challenges.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that sketch, because that's one. So I do a parenting program about development and what's happening physiologically, and I have that at the forefront as well, because everyone can relate to it, and most parents can look back and remember. I remember seeing that. But yeah, I think that just being able to, I think one of the things to think of is like, we've all been through it. We might not, I don't think sometimes we recognize it. I think sometimes when I'm talking to parents, it's almost like they've forgotten what it was like. And I think that's, I don't know what happens, but it's almost like I don't understand why they're being like this, because I remember when I was that age, I wasn't behaving in this way. And I'm kind of thinking, well, you probably were, but you're looking back on it like from the perspective from your adult brain. And at the time when you are that age, you're not thinking, I'm making this decision to be different or doing it. It's just what happens. And I think not realizing that, but yeah, I think we need to, I don't know, I think it can be, it's funny sort of joking, oh, teenagers and they're so moody and la la la, but the thing is, there's so much more to it. And it's such a, I think anyone who works with young people knows, like, it's such an exciting time and they're so fun to be with, and everything's so fluid and changeable and exciting, and they're just brilliant to work with. And there's nothing like doomy or gloomy or like, oh, it's really, like, oh, they're moody and terrible and being difficult. That's not the experience when you're actually working with them. And I think that's where it comes, what can be really important as well is, like, it's okay sort of making generalizations and this broadly is what's happening. But at the end of the day, when you're there, you're talking to your child, you know them better than anyone else. And when you focus much more on that one-to-one, like, this is the person that I'm talking to that's in front of me, all that other stuff falls away. And I think so if you can bring it back to that, that's where you really get the key moments, those nice, sparkly, nice moments that can make such a difference to them, what's happening with them, and to you and your relationship with them. So it's those like moments of connection, I think, that make the real difference.
And I think those one-to-one moments that you touched on, I think there's sometimes a lot of pressure that you need to get a lot of information out or totally understand them, but actually they might not be significant, but just to create that setup, just to make normalize that one-to-one. And it might just be in the morning as you're drinking your coffee and they're eating their breakfast, or as they come into the kitchen because they're hungry and you're cooking dinner, and you just have that. It doesn't have to be this big insightful pull of information. And Jenny, when you spoke about the parents reflecting on it as well, it got me thinking. Times were different, so maybe a few points. Times were different, so maybe like the significance of their tween years or teenage years didn't feel as much. But also, like, at the time, it's really significant. But once you have experience and look back, that significance just drops away. life, work, adulthood takes over, and you are diminishing the significance of it, and you're not able to give that perspective, to go and take that perspective again as well. And what you struggled with friendships, or your own identity, you maybe dealt with. But then another point is that maybe I do think these days, for want of a better term, that we are all spending a lot more time looking at what's going on because we have more information. Sometimes I think too much information, because it puts a lot of pressure on ourselves to think that we should be like this, or if we are like this, then we should be doing this, and the improvement and self-improvement kind of process. But actually, there is sort of the more information about it now, so we can kind of open up to it and take that. Previously there kind of wasn't, I have a tough time with friends, and you might not have had that information about why, acceptance and identity. And sorry, the point I wanted to make about, if people hadn't addressed their identity, they might still be in adulthood struggling with that now. Things that happened in childhood that they didn't address, and their tween and adolescent years were really tough, and that could have shaped who they are today. And we have this opportunity now to understand it more, thankfully, so that we can hopefully guide our young people, be it if we work with them professionally or personally in our families, that we can guide them with the information we've got, so they've got the best chance. It's a lot of thoughts.
Exactly. And I think, that's the thing. It's good and bad, isn't it? Having the information out there, it can be helpful, and then sometimes it's not helpful. But I think it's the whole, you look at the bigger picture, and you see what's happening out there and in the world and systemically, and you can see what's happening out there or in school or in your community, and you can see what's happening in your family, and then you can see what's happening with your with the young person, and that person that you're actually talking to, who's in front of you. And all of these things are all equally important. And I think going back to what you were saying about connection as well, like absolutely. So I'm always saying this to parents. It's not, who wants to be sat down like, let's sit down and talk about how was your day and what happened, and let's have a big chat about everything. Maybe some people want that, but like generally, I don't think many young people really want that. It's just little bits here and there, but it's making the most of, when you are having that connection with them, or they are coming to you or saying something, be present with them. Put your stuff down and listen to what they're saying, just for that 30 seconds or for that 1 minute. Or I'm also always saying to parents, meet them where they are. Go to what they're interested in. Don't go like, I remember I used to really enjoy watching Friends, so let's watch Friends together. Like, that's fine if they want, like, that's okay as well. But you might have to sit there and watch them play Minecraft for 5 minutes, or watch them watch YouTube. It's because you're showing them, like, I'm interested in what you're interested in, talk to me about it, and they absolutely love that. That means the world to them.
Yeah, and you might also, as a parent, suddenly think, that on Minecraft was actually
do you know what?
cool.
I got
I had no idea what you were actually doing. Actually, let me have a go, because that's
exactly
cool.
Exactly.
Jenny, another thing I'm really curious about is privacy, right? So that's another biggie, right? So now they're getting to that age where it's like, actually, my friends, I'm, gaining more importance. They're starting to have conversations about things they're not necessarily always telling you about. Or my daughter's also one for saying, if I tell you this, you're not telling it to anyone else.
Yeah.
How do we navigate? How do parents distinguish between having like a healthy need for that privacy and yet secrecy, and because we're also aware that they might not be able to control outward influences? What do you suggest in that sort of situation?
I think it's a bit of a balancing act, and it's going to change and shift. So it's not like, okay, what you need to do, you need to have the door open, you need to do this and that. It's going to change and shift, and according to the young person, your kid, right? And in those circumstances. But I think it's it's again, like Mark was saying, you need to start having these conversations with them and start talking about them. And it doesn't have to be a whole, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about privacy and confidentiality and what's okay and what's not okay, and we're going to have it all sorted out by the end of this conversation. That's not going to happen. But you just kind of gradually, weave it into, like as you're talking to them, or if something happens, they might come home from school and they might tell you something that was going on with school with a friend, and you can kind of talk to them about that, and like how do you think they're going to do? Do you think they might talk to their mum about it? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think would be reasonable? What do you think would make sense in this sort of scenario? And if you get their input in it as well, so it's you're working together on it as a team, rather than saying, right, this is what you have to do, this and this, and you have to tell me that and that. That's not going to go down very well. But talk with them. But within that, it's still like there are some things that that I don't know. It's the whole thing about safety as well. And I think one of the keys with that, one of the first things to think of with that is not necessarily how do we stop this happening, but how do we keep things open for them, so that if they feel that they're okay coming to you and telling you, like, I saw this thing or I heard this thing and I'm not quite sure what to do about it. I think that's the first step in making sure that everyone keeps safe, and you can respect their privacy in some situations, but they know in some others that it's okay for them to come out and it's okay for you to go and talk to them and keep that door metaphorically open. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's just knowing whether it's like a rational human need for privacy, or whether that retreat and the door being shut is for another reason, right? Because they're wanting to hide something because I don't know, it's a very thin line to
it's a very thin line,
isn't it?
But I think that's also part of this age is about finding independence. And some of that is like, I want to shut the door and I want to shut you out because I want to be focusing on this thing, and I want to be exploring and thinking about this kind of stuff. And I just need a bit of time to myself to work it out. So it could even be that, rather than I'm doing something really dodgy and I don't want anyone to know about it.
Probably for the most part it is.
Yeah. And I guess that's the things, if parents can like try not to, like, don't panic. It's like it's okay. But if there's something, if you feel that there's something that you're worried about or you're not sure about, I think always trust your instincts and trust your gut as a parent, because again, your child the best, the situation, and if you feel something's a bit off or you're not sure, then it's worth exploring that with them. And you can even say that it's like, I'm not quite I don't quite know how to say this, but like, I know sometimes you go in and you shut the door or you slam it, and I'm not quite sure what's going on, and then you're just opening it up to them. So you're not saying don't do that or stop doing this. It's like, tell me about what's going on.
The other one, Jenny, I wanted to touch on is the transition to secondary school, because now we're coming to the end of the academic year here slowly. Parents are beginning to rev up for that transition from primary. It's huge, right? I mean, my daughter's just gone into year 7 last year. That kind of jump, being treated differently, being no longer with your one class teacher, having to move from class to class, different teachers, different kids, the responsibilities, all that comes with it. Like, how can we support them better in this period, this transition period?
It's really hard. It's really, really difficult. I think that, going from year 6 here, I think it's similar in Australia, but like, the final year of primary school kind of thing, and then moving towards secondary school, when you're in like year 6, the final year of primary school, for a lot of children, like, that is the best year ever. It's brilliant, it's really good. I'm kind of like top of the walk. I'm like really, getting mature. I've got my phone, I've got my friends, everything's really cool. And then you go into secondary school, year 7, and it's like, and then they're around and they're, the uniform's too big and it's hanging off them and they're being shouted at suddenly. I think we should do that better. As like generally, I think society should do that better. I think we're really missing a trick, and it's such a, it's such a key stage developmentally. We know that, and the shift from how they're treated at school in year 6 to year 7, not all schools, I'm making a big generalization, but generally it's suddenly like you've gone from like everything's great and you're top of the pile and you're really cool and everything, to like you're bottom and you're the dredged and you're being told off all the time by teachers and you've got to be here and everything's really regimented. It's so like looking at that from that bigger picture kind of thing, it's quite a lot. Also, it can be really exciting as well, because it's like, big school, time to sort of change and, new friendships. So I think really from the parents' perspective, it's just thinking, well, first of all, it's happening. There's a definite time. It's like, I know in September 2026, my child is going to be going to secondary school. So you prepare for it, I think, and help them think about how they're going to work it out, what it's going to be like. But then it goes back to everything. It's like, how are you making sure you've got those connections and that relationship? How have you built on that with them, so that they know that if things are difficult, they can come to you, they can talk to you about it, or having, when they get home, it is a safe space for them to get home from school. Not saying that it's terrible, but it's just a lot. Even if you're doing like really well at school and it's great and you love it, like you come home at the end of the day and you're absolutely,
I think that's a key point though, isn't it? It's the home setting during that transition, because you can prepare them in advance, but you don't really know what it's going to be like in terms of the school and the expectations of peers, the new friendship groups, the new dynamics, the new social pressures that come in, the developmental phases that are all changing and happening. When all those things pop up, you just don't know, and there's stuff out of your control. So it is important that the home space reflects that.
Absolutely.
I just wish there was a bit more made of that, those first couple of years of, secondary or whether middle school, which we don't always recognize, where there'd be more attention on the holistic. Because I think if we put more attention on the mental health, organization skills that they're going to need throughout life, and base it on that, the enjoyment then, without having that academic pressure being so important straight from day one. I mean, again, it's generalizing, but this is what we're experiencing. I think that would be the foundation. It's like it here, like these are the things you need to do, and then we can get down to business.
Exactly. Work out, time management, what you're interested in learning as for the sake of learning, because you're interested in things, rather than, I don't know, arable farming and I don't know.
But what about the dreaded school bag, right? Like the secondary school bag blows my mind. I remember what used to be when I went. It's like I don't know, 20 kilos heavy, and what they need to take. And they cannot manage like where something has to be for what day, and when they need it. And a locker. What's a locker? Why would I put things in a locker? I mean, that is just crazy. I'm thinking about it all the time. But
it is a lot. And then, and all the time, what I hear mostly from young people, they're suddenly getting told off for socks and shirts and like ridiculous, really. It's just it's not conducive, I don't think. But
the other one I wanted to ask both of you, I'm curious, do you think that there is space for young tweens or young people in general where they can let off steam? Because I was listening to something recently, it was going back to sort of like the games we used to play back in the day, when you'd run around in a big hall and you'd get stuck in the mud, and there were all kinds of crazy games. Sometimes they were almost a bit too much, they were a bit full on, but they did allow you to kind of experience like different emotions. You could let aggression out, you could like be ecstatic, you could and it's in a different sort of field with other kids and running around. Have we lost a space where they can actually experiment by being loud and all this sort of stuff, and whether that's important anymore? To anyone who'd like to answer.
I think we have. Sorry, come on, Mark. Oh, thank you. I think we have lost those. I think we have lost those spaces. I think also, something. I don't know. There's something happening. It's not just smartphones, like Mark was saying, but it feels more. There's more keeping them in. Do you know what I mean? Like parent society. It's dangerous outside. You need to be inside, and I think they've lost a bit of that ability or the freedom. I think maybe that's part of it, a bit of freedom, but within a safe space. So yeah, I think we need to get a little bit better at that and get them out and, you know, running around, and because they still want to do that. You know, young people still want to do that, and at school. And I think the opportunities we as society have kind of reduced those opportunities, and I think that's a real shame.
A place where you could play up a bit, right? Where you're allowed to be a bit naughty, and actually better do it there than somewhere else.
We were pleasantly surprised when we did a Tween Talk session and we wanted to just reset some energy or get some energy out. I can't remember the motivation for it, but we played games like, I can't remember, you know,
party games, yeah,
like party games, just silly games.
Yeah.
You know, not duck, duck, goose, but something like that. You know,
trying to red flag, wasn't it?
Red, you know. So,
yeah.
Mark.
Yeah, but play outside play. Yeah,
I think that's exactly right, and I think, as I said before, I think there's this sense that we need to protect children in order to help them to be safe and to grow. And fundamentally, the growing up is not a series of steps. It's an ongoing journey. It's continuous, not discrete. And so I think we tend to tell children, you know, that this is appropriate behaviour for you at this age, and that you know, when you go to big school, you won't be able to do this, and you know, and it's okay to play in mud and water when you're 5, but when you get to 6, you've got to smarten up a bit and start sitting behind a table, and you know, and I think we have to move away from this sense that there's a sort of, you know, a right, the right way to behave, and we sort of putting limits on almost. I think this desire to protect and to keep safe is really detrimental, and I think that, I can't remember who said it, but someone talking about childhood in a book I read was talking about the fact that we need to stop trying to keep children totally safe and start talking about being safe enough. And you know, and we've got to you know, not be panicking all the time, you know, about grazed knees and falling out and stepping in too quickly to resolve every problem that occurs. And you know, it's this need to fix everything rather than let our children actually fix their fallouts. And if they don't play unsupervised, age appropriately unsupervised, I mean, in a sense that, you know, I'm not suggesting we just kick 3-year-olds out and they're roaming the streets wildly, but interestingly, like, I look back to my childhood, and I moved house from the city, from living in London to slightly out into Essex, a bit more space, when I was 6. Now, I know that for at least a couple of years before I moved, I used to play out with older kids supervising me in the street with no parents there. For a long period of time, riding my bike. We lived in a cul-de-sac in the middle of London, but you know, but things have changed. We just don't see that now. We don't see children having that space. Even, you know, at a park, parents are hovering close. Teachers are hovering on duty in fluorescent vests just in case something goes wrong. You know. And we're almost terrified that, you know, and I think, you know, kids used to burn off a lot of energy and steam, Penny, as you said before, by climbing trees and by hiding and, you know, and jumping on each other. And boys particularly, I would argue, but I think it's true of girls too, need to be rough, and they need to be physical, and they need to, you know, experience discomfort. They need to experience falling out, social, emotional and physical discomfort, so they know they can deal with it. They can cope with it, and it's not the end of the world. I think this wrapping in cotton wool and shielding kids from anything that might be uncomfortable socially or physically, or that is not doing them any favors. And I think it sets up for a sense that that feeling ill-equipped to deal with difficulties when they do occur naturally.
Healthy stress and conflict management, and they have to, you know, we have to work it out in real life, right? It's like we're going to have to deal with people we don't like, who push us too far, test our boundaries, all of that.
There's it's an American initiative called Let Grow, so like let go, let grow, and it's really great if you sign up to the newsletter, and it gives you really simple ideas of how you can give your children freedom. And it's, you know, it's not groundbreaking, it's going back to basics, but, you know, that unsupervised play where you feel comfortable, and taking those opportunities where you might not automatically feel comfortable, but if you do know it's safe, and you know that there's a the string or the lead you can give, you know, you can loosen it a bit, like let it. We're very fortunate here in Warsaw where it's very safe, and I will be taking advantage of that for the next year that I live here, because I won't feel as safe in other countries or cities. But I want my children to experience that. And yes, if it has to change, then I'll explain to them, you know, the context of why. But you know, like even just the road crossings here, everyone stops, you know, and it's just very much, you just got that, you can give that bit more freedom. So everyone has to do it with what's right for them. But yeah, it's going back to those basics and just seeing how you can empower them as well, like we said.
And the other one I wanted to touch on was opting out. Like, if we're not feeling great, maybe we do in the meantime as a culture kind of say, well, then we're just not going to do it. I won't do it. I don't feel like, I'm just going to pass on it today. I won't go or whatever. And I wonder if there's something in there to sort of encourage that courage, sort of say, yeah, it's not easy actually, and maybe it's not what you want to do right now. Maybe you are at your comfort movement, but actually just try it and give it a go. There's another one I feel really strongly with, and I think that sort of came off the back of COVID as well a bit, that we sometimes it's much easier now to sort of say, oh sorry, I'll cancel it last minute, or I just won't go. And that goes back as well even to our youth space, like how important it is that each member shows up, you know, and that you're part of something bigger than just yourself. And that is also really important, I think, in learning to grow and become an adult, or even as adults, how we show up in the bigger community. Yeah. And the other one I wanted to touch on was cringe. How do we deal with cringe, right? Because like tweens, it's another one. They're often highly embarrassed by their parents. So what is the best thing? If they don't want to hold your hand or all the rest of it, just let it be. Right. I don't know, Jenny, any advice?
Parents are there to be cringe. That's your job.
Forever and ever, right?
Yeah, I can't do anything about it. That's part of my job description. Sorry about that. You know, and I think most of the time they're okay with it. It's like, oh mum, you not do that. But it's said, you know, from a good place. And I do think, I think one thing as well to remember for parents, like even if you are being told something like this and it feels personal, it's like 99% of the time it is not personal. You know, it feels like it, and you can be like, oh wow, they really do not like me. My kid is hating me at the moment, but it's not. They're lashing out because that's what they're doing, and you can just like go, it's okay. You know, I'm all right.
Isn't it? It's comparison, thinking like, oh, their parents probably don't do that. But I know that when Penny and I definitely at cringe at Tween Talk, you don't see the kids who's like that we're not their parent. You don't see them cringe. They're probably laughing with us and having a laugh.
Exactly.
You know, sometimes obviously we're still, you know, adults trying to be cool. I mean, we're obviously very cool, but
when does that transition come, when it's no longer for a young person so important to fit in and conform and be like everybody else? And when does that sort of switch come, when we start to be like, actually I'm quite different than all of you and I'm cooler than you? Is there a point, like from a scientific point of view, that we get to a point in teenagehood where we begin to do that, or is it always a conformity thing? Because I feel like I've always wanted to be different. My daughter is totally, absolutely, you know, I want to fit in. I want to be like everybody else, because if you're not, that's social death.
But I think even that wanting to be different is normally, I want to be different, but within this, I want to be that different like them. You know,
but
when you think
punk hairdo.
Yeah, you think, exactly. But you think back to those sort of youth movements. You know, punk. Well, I don't know, like 50 years since the Damned, flipping heck. So, you know, but it is part of that. It's like, I don't want to conform. I do want to be different, but also I want to find other people. I need to find my other people who are also like that, and we can talk about all the people who are conforming.
Yeah, that's true. Some truth in that.
I think it's also I think we learn as children and as teenagers, and probably as adults as well, that we want to be ourselves. It's not necessarily about wanting to be different. We just want to be authentic and be ourselves. And I guess what we learn from is the way that others around us respond to us being ourselves, whether we're accepted for who we are or whether we are pressurized to conform. And I think we can do that to our children as well by, you know, when they're loud, we can tell them to quieten down, or you're too big to do that, or come on, that's not. And I think we've got to be really careful about this sense of somehow. I think we can create that sense of needing to conform to what's there. And I think I was thinking about this as you were talking about that this assumption that the teenage years are going to be terrible. The reality is that the whole of childhood, from birth to 18 and possibly beyond, is actually a strive for independence. It's a journey of wanting to be able to learn and to be accepted, that you can do your own thing, you can cope without others around you. We see it with small children where they don't want to be toddlers, where they don't want to be told what to do, and we sort of forget that those years can be challenging. And then school can be the same when suddenly the teacher is the most important person, not your mum. They talk more about Mrs. Whoever or Mr. So-and-so than they do about your and then those tween years come where they're looking forward to the next stage of independence. And then we get to the teenage years, and suddenly it's a sort of the last stage. And I think actually what's going on really is not that teens are worse than other ages, but as parents, we're more terrified by that than ever, because it's coming to the end of that journey of independence, and it's our response that changes. It's not that teenagers are more challenging than toddlers or whatever. It's just it feels more painful because you can see the end journey where you're going to have to say, the nest is it's time, you can spread your own wings, and I can't now be there. So it depends whether you see parenthood about walking alongside your child, or whether you see it about standing behind and directing, controlling, authority control, or whether actually you're walking with them hand in hand physically or emotionally as they mature towards that independence. But I think it always wraps up in that. If you can't be yourself, how can you then grow into independence if you've just got to conform and feel that you're meeting other people's expectations of you all the time? So I think we can help children in that by giving them permission to be children. I sometimes wish someone would let me be a bit more childish, and I could let my hair down a bit more. And and I can think of times where I have, and I've had a great time. Adults, we tend to do that in parties, or or on doing something a bit crazy when we get to a midlife crisis or something. But actually, there's a hidden child in all of us. I think he wants to just scream and run and climb trees and and do crazy things that embarrass people, and because that's just who we are. We just forget that, I think, as we get older.
Yeah, we could be doing it more with our tweens or with our young people possibly as well.
Alongside them, yeah.
So this is a really nice moment now to go to our tween question today, which is, I feel like 1 minute I'm fine, and the next I'm either shouting at my brother or crying because a friend didn't message me back. I don't want to be angry and upset all the time, but it can be so hard at times, and I don't know how to let it out without hurting other people's feelings. I feel one moment. Yes, that was the question. So Jenny, do you have an answer to that?
I think first of all that it is understandable that would feel confusing and difficult, and you're not quite sure what's happening, and you're worried about how what you're doing is impacting on other people. And I think it's important to remember that this is part of this age. You're going to feel like that. Everything goes up and down, but even when things are feeling really down and really bad, like that soon, if you wait a moment, things will be up again and things will feel okay. So I think if you can remember that, and I think really just sometimes just to be able to stop and just give yourself a moment and pause and just take a deep breath, and then let things settle a little bit, and normally things will start to sort of settle and feel okay. But it also shows that you're worried about other people and you don't want to hurt them or anything. But I think the people around you know you and love you, and they understand and they don't mind, and they might get a little bit cross, or it seems like they're cross at the time, but then everything will settle down and it'll all be okay again, and you can talk about it. I think that's the most important thing, that it's okay, and it's okay to have these feelings. We don't always have good days all the time. We're not always like on and everything's great and bunnies and flowers. It's okay to have bad days, and it's okay if you're feeling cranky or something's happened to snap at someone. It's okay. It's how you respond and how you work it out afterwards. That's the most important thing.
As Penny read it out, I thought that's how I behave quite a lot. And we're all still
We've all been there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And
It's
it's
fine.
often- And it's a lack of sleep. Sometimes having a good night's sleep puts things into perspective. Sometimes our heads are wheeling at nighttime, right? When everything just seems to be the end of the world, and the next morning it does look different. And maybe also having something that, if you're in that sort of moment that you think, what can I do now that is going to look after me? What's something that I like right now that can maybe support me to feel better? Mark?
Exactly.
I think it's important for all of us, but for children to realise, as you just said, that we all have those feelings and those moments. But I guess what we do is we learn to manage those and recognise them quicker. And I think for children and young people, often they creep up on them and they assume that those feelings are actually reality. And I think we need children, help children and young people to realise that actually our brains are amazing at tricking us into assuming that because, you know, that like that my friend didn't message me back point, well, that may be because they were busy, not because they didn't hate you, but you're reading that you're rejected and that they don't want to be with you. And I think the online world certainly amplifies those feelings often when we're not with people physically. So the opportunity to actually make sure we spend time with people that we care about, that we enjoy their company, is important. And the other thing is, I think, to recognise our own humanity, that none of us are great, and we all rely on the grace and kindness of other people to accept us for who we are, and that we know sometimes we can be horrible, but our people that matter still accept us, and they look beyond that and realise that, you know, because what we say isn't always what we are and what we mean. And I think it's not easy to you know, so you can't put an old head on young shoulders. But I think the more we help, you know, young people to think about that and to realise it's okay. It's not a pathology to be angry or to be sad or to cry or to be frustrated. That's normal. That's just part of who we are. And if we can feel those feelings and sense them and own them, I guess, then actually what we're doing is embracing our own humanity, our own being. Imagine if we didn't feel anything and we didn't have that, and how shallow our lives would be. And so I think we can help children to start to see that, you know, just as they can appreciate the moments of joy and happiness, that they're just other emotions. They'll come, they'll go, and pass, and it's hard, but you only learn that by experiencing them. Back to that, not always sheltering them from those bad experiences. It's hard right now, but it will be better.
Yeah, and the lows make the highs so much more meaningful, right?
Exactly right.
Amazing. Thank you so much to our guests, Mark and Jenny, for joining us today and for sharing such important and valuable insight. Today's conversation reminds us that being a tween is an extraordinary challenge and an exciting period of growth at the same time. It's a time when young people are trying to hold on to the safety of childhood with one hand while reaching for independence and recognition with the other. Reminds us that while their world is busy, confusing, and endlessly alluring, their deepest need hasn't changed at all: to be seen, to belong, and to know they don't have to be perfect to be loved. This is a crucial window while they're still talking to us, still valuing our input, still showing us just how capable they are when we give them the responsibility and the space to prove it. Thank you to our listeners for joining us today. If this episode resonated with you, if you recognised your own tween somewhere in this conversation, please share it with someone who might need to hear it, and do leave us a review. It helps us keep these conversations going. We're Penny and Jenny, and this has been Perspectives from the Informed Perspective. Keep noticing those small shifts and keep reflecting on what our young people are really asking for. Keep informing those perspectives.